The visual part of the brain is a huge, huge part of the brain.
Today I'll be talking with Dave Gray, founder of Explain,
chairman and founder in one of the leading consulting companies in this area,
author of Game Storming and Liminal Thinking.
Kind of always define myself as an artist. We're just walking around kind of assuming that we're all seeing the same thing. 5 people have 5 different views of a situation. Sometimes shifting the frame is enough to solve the problem. How would I think about this problem if I was a chef? There are a lot of emotions and deep thoughts and perceptions that lie just beneath the surface of every conversation. Everybody has someone that they wish they could have a better connection with. I never ever thought of myself as a facilitator. Game Storming has sold a lot of books and a lot of people use it. Let's see if we can turn this into a toolkit.
Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, René. It's really great to be here. Appreciate you inviting me.
Happy you're here too. I have so many questions to get started with, but why don't we just start with visual thinking and how long you do that already?
The visual part of the brain is a huge, huge part of the brain. So I think it's something we're doing all the time. I was probably more visually oriented than a lot of people. I drew a lot as a kid, and I kind of insisted on going to art school to study. And so I've just been very fascinated by the visual aspect of thinking really my whole life. And I'm 61, so that's 61 years.
And you wrote in that time 3 books?
Depending on how you count. Yeah, three with traditional publishers and 1 self-published book.
How many people do you think you impacted?
All I can say is I'm continually surprised and grateful for all the people that pop up, and it happens a lot. They've been influenced by me. It's a little bit humbling to hear people say that they were reading my stuff in magazines when they were a kid. But it's more and more the case as I get older.
Yeah, I bet. You recently also launched this library called 100 Visual Frameworks.
Yeah.
It's also hanging on our wall here. We used it in a workshop. We designed even templates based on it. So it's a recurring inspiration to us. I'm curious though, how would you define like a visual framework?
We all have mental models that we carry around in our heads about how things work, what they are, what to expect from them. We all have an idea of what a home is, what a car is, a river, an ocean, a windmill. Visual frameworks are these kind of schematic pictures that are really stripped down to the essence of what that mental model might be. And like a maze is a good example of a visual framework. We all have this idea of a maze. It could represent this kind of feeling of being lost or confused or not knowing where to go. There's very common concepts that people have in their heads, and I would call that maybe a frame. And so a lot of times when you find yourself facing a problem or a challenge, it's because you have a certain frame that you're using around the information or the complexity that you're confronting. And sometimes shifting the frame is enough to solve the problem. I have a friend who told me about a workshop he ran recently where he just laid the 100 frameworks out on a table, and he asked everyone on the team to say, why don't you pick one that represents our current state of our team and one that represents the future state that you'd like to see in our team. And everybody picks different ones. They have an interesting conversation. And one of the things I've discovered, René, is that there are a lot of emotions and deep thoughts and perceptions that lie just beneath the surface of every conversation that we're having, but we don't usually see. We're kind of skimming on the surface in our boats, like a kayaks or something. We're not really understanding all the deep life that's going on underneath us. And with these cards, it tends to bring all the interesting sea life, undersea life up to the surface for a little while, and can really result in some very rich and interesting conversations.
I think you also describe it as a way to like unstuck a person or like unstuck a team.
We all have a tendency to think that everyone's seeing the same thing that we're seeing in the world, if we're with a group of people. But the fact is that everybody's seeing everything slightly or greatly differently. And we just don't realize it. We're just walking around kind of assuming that we're all seeing the same thing, but we're not. And these cards can help. I find that they're really powerful. And as people have conversations about the different ways that they see things, it's kind of like walking around something. You know, when you walk around something, you get a better a more three-dimensional, richer view of it. So people build common ground.
There's this concept as well of, or this story where blind people have to describe an elephant and they get to touch the elephant and everyone gives a different explanation or definition of what this animal is. It's a little bit like that as well, right? In collaboration, whereas people have different perspectives and views on the topic at hand.
Yeah, and that's where the cards came from, actually. I wanted to draw a picture of a business scenario. And it was a little bit like the blind men and the elephant story that you would tell me, because I would talk to one person and they would say it was one thing. And then I would talk to another person and they would say it was something different. And I had a really hard time reconciling different people's perspectives and points of view to make a picture that everyone could agree on, which led to, well, this is really time consuming and it's not very productive. Let's just get the 6 people in a room together. And where the visual frameworks came from is there was always a moment in this process, if we got where we wanted to go, which was most of the time, there was always a point in the process that things went from being just scribbles and boxes and arrows to moment of crystallization. I would see common themes, things would come up over and over. An iceberg, would come up, or mountain climbing, or the idea that our company is like a machine, or that it's like a building. And these things just would come up over and over. And that's when I decided to say, okay, let's look at all these napkin sketches over the years. Let's see what some of the common themes are. Let's see if we can turn this into a toolkit. This collection.
I'm just wondering, could we go through like some of them just to get like a bit of the behind the scenes of how we got there?
Yeah.
I think that would be really interesting.
Yep. This is the website. That's how I started, by kind of collecting these and putting them up and creating links between them. So I've thought a little bit about how you might want to navigate these. I think Tetris is a really interesting one. What are you doing when you play Tetris? It's this feeling that you have all these things coming at you and you have to put them away. You have to put them in the right place. There are lots of situations in life where you have to figure out how to pack things. This could be your email. This could be your customer complaints. We don't have time to think because all we're doing is we have tasks coming in and we're constantly focused on solving the small tasks, but we never have a chance to ask, what is the game we're playing, or why are we playing this game? Or we're not ever having time to think about the big picture. One guy told me that I thought was interesting was, he said, I like this. It's kind of like sticky notes, but I like it better because with a sticky note, I often don't even know where to begin. It's a blank page and I have to write the whole story. Whereas here, I can pick a card. And so there are so many of these, and it was really hard for me to get it down to 100, honestly.
Curious about diving into a couple more, because it's so interesting to get into the detail of them. I mean, I look at them because they basically hang next to my working desk.
Wonderful. Yeah.
To me, it's like really, really, really nice to just sometimes out of inspiration look at one of them.
Yeah. And just pick anyone you want and we can dive in. Bridge is a great one. This is an extremely common one. And that's because a lot of times a business situation is about, we are in one place, we need to get to another place. How are we going to get there? And how can we break this down into 5 steps? And, the cloud, sort of the mist below, has a label there because often we are trying to get over a challenge. You could see the left often as current state, the right as future state, and what are the steps we're going to take to get there. You could also see it, though, as like one, and this happens as well. We have this one division and this other division and these 2 companies, and we're not talking to each other, and we need to build a bridge. We have the confusion there, the fog at the bottom, that is like the things that we have to figure out in order to meet in the middle. So you could see how this bridge is a metaphor that has a broad array. Everybody has some place that they are. Everybody has some place that they're trying to get. Everybody has someone that they wish they could have a better connection with, that they feel like they would like to build a bridge between here and there. So bridge is a connection. And there's another card, which is gap. There's the situation before the bridge. And that's where we're separated and we haven't got an idea about how we're going to connect.
I wonder, are there like other ones that come up very commonly?
Well, layer cake comes up a lot. Structures might have layers to them. So there might be maybe at the top is the layer where the user is interacting with the system, but you have systems beneath that are connected to that. And maybe you have data and other things that thinking of them as a stack, you'll hear people talk about a technology stack sometimes, but thinking about that stuff as a stack or as a layer cake gives you a way to say, okay, what's the top of the layer cake? What is the bottom? What are the things in the middle? What represents how many layers are there in our cake? And what are the layers? Why are these things on different layers? Why does that make sense? Why is it helpful?
Yeah. Cool. Nice. There's another one.
Yeah, pain gain is a very common one. That is the case whenever people are trying to motivate others to change. So any kind of a change initiative or sales, very important to understand what's the problem you're solving for your customer. Whenever you buy something, usually you have either a pain that you're trying to alleviate or you want to get a reward. Pains and gains are a way for people to reinforce why you might want to make a decision or make a change in your life. Why are we adopting this new software? Oh my God, I have to change. I'm going to have to learn a new software. Well, yes, but remember, here are all the things that are the headaches that you've been complaining about for the last 10 years about the way that we work. And here's how the software is going to fix those problems. And here's why it's going to be better. That kind of thing.
Yeah, love it. That is super useful. I think also, especially when people are kind of anchored in a negative bias or like a negative thinking loop. Like, especially if they get to write the gains down themselves, right? Then we don't have to convince them.
The other thing about these that I think is interesting about these visual frameworks is that they emerged out of a lot of dialogue and conversation about trying to understand a problem and trying to map it. But one thing that's kind of interesting is that I never thought of them as being useful in an emergent way. As I never thought of them or designed them to have that suggestive quality. Like, oh, this looks like my problem, but they do. They kind of encapsulate a whole range of kind of emotional, like the sailboat you just had up. There's a lot of things that are exciting about a sailboat. Some people are afraid of the ocean and being out on the ocean, and some people see adventure, and some people see relaxation. And sailboat elicits all kinds of different things from different people, but it tends to be a nice way to describe a business or a team. You have your North Star or your pole star that you're navigating by. You have your sails that are giving you power, but you also have these things that you don't control, like the wind and the currents in the water and whatever animals might be trailing you. And you have someone looking at the front, looking out with the telescope, kind of trying to help navigate, and someone at the back who's kind of steering. You have this sense of the keel that keeps you upright in the water. So all these things and the threats that might be under the surface, all these things can map onto a business situation, especially a situation where you want to get more control, but you have a lot of uncontrollable forces around you. That's where I think a sailboat is really interesting, because, a sailboat has to operate in all kinds of weather, you have to be able to go in the way, figure out how to use the currents in the water and the wind to get where you want to go. And these are things that you don't control. So a lot of times people talk about business and they focus only on the things they can control. The sailboat is a nice opportunity to start to talk about, well, what are the forces that are affecting us, and how might we use them to our advantage? How might we, if the wind's blowing always against us, maybe we should turn the boat around and go someplace different,
Yeah. Oh, we really have to adjust the sails then.
Yeah.
To use the wind in some way.
Right.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. It's also cool that you use so much detail in the sailboat, because the way I got to use it was like very plain and simple. But for example, with the sailboat, for the first time, I saw that there was someone, for example, in the front looking a bit more towards the direction, right?
Yeah.
So these are these details, or the danger in the ocean with the shark, that are really nice to see. I really like this one as well, like the plane.
Yeah.
I think this is one of my favorites for sure. It's also one we used a lot.
That's another one that is very similar in the sense that you can, whatever your situation is, whatever your business situation is, you might have passengers, you might have baggage, you might have pilots. So even the things that aren't drawn can become part of the story, because you have all these concepts around airplanes that can be useful, and they're all part of that mental model inside your head. Like the airport, the whole process of getting onto a plane, what happens to your bags and how they get lost. And there's a direction maybe that you're going. And again, there might be turbulence. There might be the wings or what's the engine that's supplying the power, and how are you keeping the thing upright and stabilized. And so it's not only just what's in the picture, that all these mental models, they're connected to each other in various ways in your mind.
Yeah.
I remember one time working with a bank, and it was a technology team in a bank, and I asked them to draw their problem. And one guy raised his hand, told me, he said, I'm really stuck. I don't know how to draw this. I have an idea in my head of what it is, but I have no idea how to draw it. And I said, well, how would you think about it if you were a chef or a sea captain? Maybe can that help you? And he thought for a minute. He said, yeah, maybe I can work with that. And then 15 minutes later, when everyone was sharing their pictures, he had this picture of a restaurant and a menu. And he said, here's our problem. We have a restaurant, but we don't know what we're serving. Even though people 90% of the time, they want the same thing, every time someone comes in with a request, we take notes, and then we go out and we have to do all our grocery shopping, and we have to find new recipes, and we have to figure out how to make that one particular kind of thing. We should have a menu. That was his kind of thing. We should have a menu, and it's like, these are the things that people can order when they come into our technology shop. And we have a kitchen that's already stocked. We have our recipes. We know how to make it. We know what most of the time people are going to want. And then if someone wants to order off the menu, they want to make a special order, we can accommodate that, of course. But let's give them a starting point. And all that came from just giving him a mental model. Chef, that's where he started. How would I think about this problem if I was a chef? And suddenly that's an example of what I was saying earlier about frames, right? That if you have a particular frame on a problem, you feel stuck. You get the right frame, and suddenly you can unpack it, and it seamlessly opens up. And I actually remember there was an admin or a secretary in the room, and who said, "Oh my God, for the first time, I understand what we do." And
because this guy described the menu?
Because of the way this guy described the menu. Yeah. And the way he described their technology group as this restaurant where people come in and they order things because they have problems they needed. And I think that's the power of, if you can get a certain fluidity and learn to move between frames, you can find a lot of interesting ideas for solving problems. If you slow down and say, okay, what if we looked at this from this perspective? Sometimes, and I said sea captain or a chef, and those were just random things that I pulled out of my head. Sometimes it could be useful just to pull a random card out and say, okay, what would happen if I thought about my situation in terms of a menu? Well, this could solve a lot of problems for a lot of people, right?
I love that one. Oh man, we could go into many, many more.
Yeah.
Is there like a last one that you would want to choose, or anything that you like particularly?
I like stepping stones. Sometimes you don't know enough about a problem or even the goal to build a bridge to the other side. You don't know enough about the landscape or even where you're trying to go. I think stepping stones can be very helpful in the sense that you can take a step into an unknown territory, stop, look around, try and figure out where you go next, and just kind of take one step at a time and see what you can see, because you can't always see the other shore from one side. So I think that it's a great metaphor for approaching problems where you're not exactly sure how to get where you're going or what you want. It's very much this idea of kind of agile development and working in iterations and constantly testing things out in the real world, where you have a sense that you're moving forward. And you don't have to have all the answers to take the next step. You just have to figure out what's the best next step. I think that's a really great way to think about and explore possibilities when you really aren't sure what the possibilities are. You want to create space for them to emerge.
Nice. Wow. Well, I think we got definitely through a lot of them. Yeah, I will spend much more time because I'm really interested and intrigued into those visual frameworks. I want to thank you so much for coming up here and leading me through some of them.
My pleasure. I appreciate you sticking around an extra hour after work. And if you want to follow up or have another conversation, happy to do that. So great to meet you.
All right. Thanks a lot
Yeah.
again. And
Thank you.
I hope to speak soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.